Sports Live Friday football review for Week 4. I'm Ramon Scott, and I'm joined by Adam Paul of ECPreps. And Adam, I'd say it was a good week. I'd say the stock for the East County is on the rise. We had a few hiccups in there. We'll talk about those, but mostly we're going to talk about the big games and the big results this week, sir. I will have several questions I want to ask you about the top teams in the county, and let's get it started with the big news from the past weekend. Number 3 Helix, that might be about to change. 45. Number 1 Cathedral Catholic 27. Helix didn't just beat Cathedral Catholic, they beat them down. Cathedral got back in the game late in the second half and closed the gap and made it exciting, but Helix pulled away again. And really, look, Cathedral, we can mark them down a little bit, Adam. Maybe we got a little overzealous in our rankings of them, not only locally but nationwide. But they're still a great football team. They just have trouble when they go to Benton Hart Stadium.
Yeah, standing room only crowd, obviously, for that game. It was a heavyweight championship boxing match, football game. Kind of remind, going back 26 years ago, Notre Dame hosting Florida State, who was number 1, winning the South Bend. Supposedly the great team with Charlie Ward, the Heisman hopeful. And what happens? They lose to Notre Dame and Rick Meyer, in a thriller, and what was to turn the game of the century. And then, the following week, Notre Dame, number 1, gets shocked by Boston College on a last-second field goal. It's kind of what this kind of reminded me of that whole scenario. 26 years ago, just had that big fight, big game feel. Hasn't happened in a long time here in San Diego, other than that maybe the closest thing was the Open Championship game a couple of years ago, when everybody in the beginning of the year said if it wasn't Mission Hills versus Helix, it would be a big disappointment. And sure enough, it was the immovable object versus the irresistible force. Mission Hills versus Helix in that Open Championship, and Helix winning that Open Championship. Like I said, this, same atmosphere. Like you said, Cathedral kind of made it a close game there in the second half. But, Coach Robbie Owens, it was his birthday, so that was a big win. He told the kids that's all he wanted for his birthday was the big win. And, you and I talked about, what was going to be, the different, the deal with Helix was whether or not the quarterback play was going to show up. And sure enough, it did. From what I've seen, my understanding, Elion Noah, had his numbers on the night. The defense really played well, came out and gut punched the Dons. So it was just one of those deals that I didn't think it was going to be this kind of game, honestly. And I know you and I talked about that.
Well, Helix just had spectacular performances all around. Cathedral actually ended up doing a nice job. They achieved their per-game average in yards, but Anthony Lombardo, Sean Martinez, they were stellar up front. John Carroll had a huge game at linebacker, and Delshawn Traylor made a number of big tackles from his defensive back spot. But I got to give credit to the birthday boy, Coach Owens. He switched Cameron Brown to quarterback in the preseason, wanted a little bit more passing. And, man, 13 of 17, Adam, passing for the senior. He had over 100 yards passing at the end of the first half. And how about sophomore Christian Washington? This is what we're talking about when we get to talking about the Helix talent. Where do they come from? Well, they're really just in reserves, the way the system works over there. You just have young stars on the next level. Well, the sophomore, he caught a little floating pass, a 30-yard touchdown. pass, and he had that big 93-yard kickoff return that swung the momentum after Cathedral had worked their way back, as we've seen so many times in the Helix Cathedral games. A play on special teams swings the momentum once again. So just a huge win for Helix. Fato, he ended up passing Lawrence Walker. That means he's in second right now, all time in the East County, right?
Yes, behind Jamon McClendon. Yes.
So 116 yards for him. He's got over 5,200 yards. I thought it was neat. We kind of finally heard from Reggie Bush this week for the first time on the achievements of El Elyon Noah. And I thought, while Reggie was speaking from the heart, he kind of said the right things. And I'm surprised that Reggie actually has never met Fato.
Yeah, maybe timing just never worked out. I mean, Reggie was a busy guy for all those years when he played in the pro, the NFL. He's still got his camp out there at Helix. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, that was pretty cool of him to do that. Like you said, making the adjustments Owens did, with putting Cameron Brown out at quarterback. He stepped up, and the other kid, Washington, you mentioned, he stepped up. He's only a sophomore, as you said. The question is, everybody seems to think, oh, Helix is down. Well, it's next man up syndrome.
All right, next man up. So I've got to ask you. I mean, this is a burning question over the last 24 hours. I can't sleep. Adam, what do you do? I mean, I've sent in my poll vote, and I've seen some of the other media pundits out there putting their poll on Twitter, and they all kind of look the same. But I'm going to ask you. I'll make a guess first. I want to know how many out of the 31 first-place voters you think will vote for Helix #1 come Tuesday morning when that poll is released, because I think there's an argument that could be made that Saints, currently undefeated, playing an easier schedule right now than both Helix and Cathedral, could move to #1, and I think a lot of people will vote them #1, maybe as many as 10, maybe even 15 people out of those 31 might vote the Saints #1, but I don't know. If you look at the way Cathedral was ranked so highly, and Helix lost now. You look at Harriman, their stock is on the rise after this week's results, so they're obviously a good team. And what we see a lot of times is when we play these intersectional rivalry games, meaning two county powers playing each other, these teams are familiar with one another. Upsets happen because of emotion, home field swings. When you play an out-of-section team, especially an elite one, you don't know what to expect necessarily. You've seen them on film, maybe. You haven't played them in a couple years. So it's a little bit different feel. Who's #1? Who do you got, and who do you think the media will have this week?
Helix, just because of this, in my honest opinion, that's who I'm voting for. I haven't turned in my poll yet, but that's who I got as the #1 team. Strength of schedule. You beat a excellent Seguro team. The Harriman loss. Obviously, what the results were. I don't know what they won their game by this past week. But from what you just said, the stock, that loss looks even better if you can say a loss is a good thing. They've played the tougher schedule. It's all about the strength, the numbers game. It's a strength of schedule numbers game. And right now, Helix, they beat the old Ric Flair adage. Like I was telling Christian Pedersen the other night on Friday Night Recap, to beat, Ric Flair used to say, to be the man, you got to beat the man. Well, they are the man after beating the man. #1, I understand, it's the 5th week coming up, so we got a lot of football left to play. But, Helix is #1.
Yeah. They just defeated the number 9 ranked team in the entire country. Saints are a great team. And let's just talk about that right now. I'll just let you know, I've got Helix #1, Cathedral #2, Saints #3. But you know what? Saints, it doesn't matter, because all you got to do is win this week's game at home against the Helix Highlanders. And Adam, I think Helix might now be expected to win based on these results. But look at the emotion swings too. I mean, maybe Helix got caught in the Harriman game looking ahead to this huge game with Cathedral. Now you're coming off this big high of the victory.
Now,
There's a lot of talent on the Saints. A lot of
yeah.
talent. There's more talent, I think, right now. Maybe the Saints' talent is even more of a name brand in this county than some of this young Helix talent. But I think Helix has as much talent. I think they're kind of expected to win this game. But, right, it doesn't surprise you if Saints somehow pulls off this upset.
Oh, yeah. And I wouldn't even really call it an upset. You know, again, this is the second week of the gauntlet, as you and I have talked about. Because, you know, the following week, Helix plays Oaks Christian. You know, we talked about the possibility that, you know, Helix could, you know, start the season 1-4. Obviously, that ain't going to happen. You know, the reason why I say Helix is also number one, it's an 18-point victory. It wasn't a 1-point game, wasn't a last second field goal or an overtime win. They dominated them. Yeah, and I know Cathedral came back in the second half, made it a game, but, you know, 45-27. That's an 18-point game. That's, you know, especially against, you know, the number 9 team in the nation, according to various polls. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, the lowest polls had Helix maybe is. I'm talking about some of the other national polls. You know, Helix was maybe around 15th or so. So
you know, this upcoming game, you know, like we were talking about standing room only, it's going to be standing room only this week against Saints. If it's not sold out, I'll be shocked. They're out at Mesa College. I'll be really shocked. Get there early, bring your popcorn. Saints, they've only allowed 12. The defense has only allowed 12 points on the year. Granted, they haven't played the toughest schedule, but, you know, you've got to play who you got to play. They, you know, Angelo Peraza, you know, they just dominated Otay Ranch 62-0. Threw for a touchdown. Richard Colmanero threw 3 scores for 75 yards. I mean, Sam Scaife III had a big game for Saints at the wideout position. You know, I saw the note that St. Augustine, which is expected to vault to number 1 in the rankings, is 4-0, has only allowed 12 points. Their defense has forced 14 turnovers and has compiled 13 sacks and 51 tackles for a loss. Angelo Peraza and Richard Colmanero have combined for 15 to 20 passes for 246 in that 62-0 win over Otay Ranch. Sam Scaife had 5 catches for yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. But Byron Cardwell, the running back, had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Saints has got weapons. I'm not saying that they're going to come out, you know, and dominate Helix. I mean, maybe they will. I mean, I don't know. You know, like you and I, we talked about, Helix just, they get up for these games, and that's what makes them such an interesting squad.
Well, and I contend that sometimes Helix loses when they're expected to win a big game and wins when they're maybe an underdog in a big game. So that would be a, you know, negative algorithm heading into this game, especially Saints ranked 17th in the state. I misspoke earlier when I said I meant Cathedral Catholic was ranked as high as 15th in some of the other polls, not maybe the computer rankings, which had them in the top 10 at number 9 or number 8 or whatever. But still, the Saints are going to be a respected opponent in this game, and maybe that home field will help them a little bit. I mean, this could end up some wacky result. And then, needless to say, we kind of put the pressure on Helix, saying that maybe they needed to win one of these games to ensure that they get in the open division. That might have locked it up, providing they don't stumble in league, to one or two teams, But
I think even if they were to lose, let's just say they were to lose to Steel Canyon, that's not a bad loss.
well,
If they're still high enough, I think they still can make that open in maybe the third or the fourth spot. But even if they finish, obviously they want to make the open, but with them only going to four teams, it's like the other question was, okay, who's that fourth team behind Cathedral, Saints, and Helix?
Well, and that was the dilemma in the poll this week, with Lincoln not being able to score in their game, and another Mission Hills dropping a little bit. So that puts the whole conundrum on these other ranked teams right now in the Grossmont Conference.
Sure.
Let's give Steel Canyon the benefit of the doubt. I mean, they're the higher ranked team. They're biding their time a little bit. They're playing decent programs and beating those programs and slowly moving up these rankings. I mean, if they could spring that upset over Helix, all of a sudden it's a whole new world, because all of a sudden Steel Canyon, or a winner of a Grossmont Hills League, so should something crazy happen, ends up as the open division representative. Not that the East County couldn't even somehow fight that Western League and get two teams in somehow. I don't know how that would work computer-wise. It would seem to me like, Cathedral, Saints, Helix, and then another team who evolves out of that team, whether it be a Lincoln, whether it be one of those other teams that's rising up. But all that, the Grossmont Hills League champion, it might make a big difference. Helix is still going to have an incredible strength. So I see what you're saying, but if somehow one of these other three teams, let's move on with it and start talking about them, and we can include them in the conversation, right? I mean, we've taken up 15 minutes on Helix. Steel Canyon shuts out Bonita Vista 28-0. Wes Neely, 169 yards rushing. He looked explosive on Friday night, Adam. He had a pair of touchdowns. He also had 51 yards receiving. How about Jeremy Mendez-Gal? He continues to look pretty impressive. Had a big pass to Antoine Walker from 65 yards out. Steel Canyon continues to move up the rankings. They may be even fifth this week. I don't know what you say about that, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, they love playing at Southwestern College. It's like their home, their second home, They just love that atmosphere. A lot of teams, you never know how kids are going to react to playing in a bigger stadium than what they're used to playing in, But Coach Longerbone and his staff, they got them prepped. They came out and did what they did against Bonita Vista, and yeah, I put them. I've got them fifth for my poll that I'm going to be sending in later tonight.
They have the top defense in the county, Adam?
What's that?
Do they have the top defense in the county? Or do you think
have one? They got one of them. I'll tell you that. I've seen. You and I have seen them. They move fast. So, I mean, we saw them play, in that Eastlake game to open up the season, and that running back for Eastlake's pretty good, and they limited him. Those guys, they're super quick. They're either one or two in the county.
Yeah, some of these defenders. How about helping in the shutout? Cam Ewert had an impressive sack and several big hits. The Barons had just 142 total yards. Colton Guerrero, 7 tackles, including 1 for loss. Viamu Ayu Rugby Morse, our buddy, he had 5 tackles, including 2 for loss. And Chance Johnson chased down a ball carrier inside the 5-yard line, Adam. It looked like the Barons were going to go in and try to get on the field. And Chance chased him down. That was on an 81-yard completion. So at Steel Canyon, the defense never rests.
It just goes to show you, how they could have let them, to break the shutout, but Johnson, he's super quick. Um, Obviously, to preserve that shutout, 28-0, where it probably could have been 28-6, 28-7, whatever, pending the extra point or the extra point. But preserving the shutout is a pretty big goal for these defenses.
And next week at Otay Ranch, hey, no Otay Ranch, no slouch. Do not overlook this opponent. They already have a big, impressive win this year, and it's not a team you want to take lightly. They need to be focused right now. Nobody's Otay Ranch doesn't have enough offense to upset Steel Canyon. I don't think.
Going down to the South Bay is always tough. The games between because they've played each other in the past. I think it's been a couple years now. But to go down there and on the bus ride down the freeway, down near the border and whatnot, that's always tough. The officiating is a little bit different down there. Not saying that it's not different up here. You know what I mean? But I think Steel Canyon, if they do what they're supposed to do, I think that they'll have no issues.
Adam, going into last week's game, I touted the watch out for the Olympian defense. They held Torrey Pines, a ranked Torrey Pines team that was like 7th in the polls and still is, to just 10 points. Well, the Grossmont Foothillers put up a city burger on Olympian, 52-28. Let's give Olympian a little credit. It was 14-10 Eagles at halftime.
Yeah.
So, a little bit of concern there, I'd say, for the Hillers. As impressive as the numbers, you're going to give us all the gory details. Friday the 13th. What a night for the Foothillers, man. I just want to mention before you talk about the stats, but we've waited for Robert Tucker. I mean, we've seen his explosive play now that he's healthy, even this season. Seen some big plays from him, and kind of a guy that people have talked about and waiting for a breakout performance. Well, it was Friday night, man. Robert Tucker, 462 all-purpose yards. I think he was responsible for 5 or 6 touchdowns, 275 yards rushing, and a big 97-yard run where his shoe came off. And so many other things happened in this game, Adam. Tell me about it.
Yeah, no, he accumulated 6 touchdowns. Jamie Odom threw for 277 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he rushed for almost 100 yards and had another score on the ground. He became through one of his completions, put him over the 5,000-yard career mark. The third Foothiller quarterback to do so this decade. It's such an impressive offense. It's clicking. Not just Robert Tucker, but just that offense in general, there's always been so much hype, around the Foothillers, up-tempo, go style offense. Okay. That when it's not doing what it's supposed to do, it's like, well, that's Grossmont for you. You know what I mean? They just, in years past, you could say they didn't, play up to the potential, but now it looks like, with everybody healthy and Odom as a, 3-yarder, running that spread offense the way it's supposed to be ran. Because that's, not just, you can't just go out there and say, oh, we're gonna run the spread offense. You got to know how to run the offense. It's pretty complicated. But Coach Carlo, congratulations to him actually too. Joins the 100 win club for a career. So congratulations to him. just overall, like you said, they were down 14-10 at the break, and whatever Carlos said at half, it was rah Hillers, man.
know
So
what
yeah,
Carlos said.
whatever he said.
Yeah, in the second half, Brody Schicker, Devin Jackson, Chris Cherzen, and Max Cadwallader. Great second half for those guys. And defensively, Chris Alba, just a huge night. 21 tackles, 3 for loss, and a pass breakup. So dominating performance for the Foothillers. They're still undefeated, and I hope this Valley View team is bringing some kind of defense at them, because I don't think this is going to be pretty.
No, I don't think so either. They've only I think they have only won like one game so far, but then they've given up a ton of points. Um, you know, you mentioned Chris Alba. Finally, he's playing to what everybody said. Because you and I, we both heard about him when he was a freshman, and he got hurt and kind of slowed down his play last year and whatnot. But now that he's healthy, he's finally playing to what we heard about when he was a fresh, underclassman. Um, Offensively, the Hillers put up 658 total yards. A couple weeks after they had previously held the record, which was obviously only held for 7 or 8 days, as it was broken by Bishops and the great Tyler Buckner, the Notre Dame commit. I don't see this game against Valley View as a close one. I think it'll be over by halftime, just based upon the stats.
Sure. Speaking of defense, Granite Hills did their part in a 20-0 shutout. Matt Millum, 2 sacks. Jacob Hennessy, 3 tackles for loss. Ethan Bishop, 9 tackles. And Justice McComb rushed for a pair of touchdowns. 20-0, a shutout win over Westview at Valley Stadium.
Yeah, they in front of their home crowd. Those kids, they did an unbelievable job. They called themselves the Nest, or whatever they call them. I think they call themselves the Nest. They did a phenomenal job, cheering on the Eagles. Defensively, they allowed 0 passing yards and points,
0.
obviously. Yeah, 0 passing yards. That's according to the notes that I saw.
Oh, man. A big fat goose egg in yardage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ethan Bishop had 9 tackles. Like you said, Jacob Hennessy had 3 tackles for loss. Matt Millum had 2 sacks. They did what they were supposed to do against a decent Westview squad. I just think right now Granite Hills is kind of flying a little bit under the radar. I think they'll move up in the polls. I think. I think they're setting themselves up to make a run.
Yeah, Adam, in the game, Justice McComb, he had that 17-yard run on a keeper. The Eagles led just 7-0 at halftime. He also had a couple of hookups with his buddy James Johnson, who continues to perform well. But I noted in the second half, Kevon Martin had to be his first game of the season. I didn't know he was going to be a member of this team, so it caught me by surprise when I saw his name. He rushed for a 10-yard touchdown. So welcome back, Kevon. That's a big addition to the Eagles. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know the whole story behind that, but yeah, it's most definitely an added weapon for McComb in the offense. Tell you what, Justice McComb, for having no varsity experience coming into this season, Moni, he's really impressed me. He's not flashy. He does, he does what he does, gets the ball to Johnson and the rest of the squad, and he can run. To be honest with you, what's Jake from a couple of years ago. I would almost compare Justice to Jake from a couple years ago. Maybe with a little bit better arm, because obviously Justice can throw the ball, can sling the ball a little bit.
Wow. Yeah, one thing Justice was doing a lot of in this past game was dropping back and stepping up and taking off running. He did it quite a bit, and it was a big part of the game, a big part of the game plan for the Eagles. Now the Eagles have a bye this week, so we'll see. I mean, they're outside of the top 10 right now in the poll, so whether they'll move, they won't move into the top 10, I don't think, this week, but they're inching up there.
Yeah.
And in our little four-way situation, we just talked about them in the Hills League, so give them a chance. All they need is a win against one of those teams to, I don't know who's going to win this thing, but it would mess things up. That's for sure.
Going back to, Macomb, when you and I, if we sit down and talk about postseason awards, I really think, depending on what what the Eagles end up doing, I honestly think he's a guy that, should be considered for as one of the top quarterbacks, in our little bit of the county. Like I said, for having no varsity experience, he's really, coming to his own these first few games of the season.
You want to talk about a quarterback, brother? I got your quarterback right here.
Yeah, I'll agree with you to a certain extent. Don't get me wrong. I think it's great that they're putting up the numbers. But yeah.
Yeah, the Sultans this week. Yeah, sure. I was lobbing you one there because Nathan Temple. I mean, take it for what it's worth. I mean, Santana, they're the number one team in Division 4. They're expected to compete for this championship, playing the level of competition that they're supposed to be playing, and even playing some big, important games. I'll talk to you about that in just a second. Temple, 15 of 26 this past Friday, 284 yards and 4 touchdowns. Santana, 462 total yards. Randy Smith caught a pair of touchdowns. Brooks Mutaw was in the mix. Jared Forster, great shutout performance by the Sultans. I was there and I enjoyed it tremendously. I knew they'd roll over this team. It was a running clock in the second half, Adam, but Santana continues to roll again, but look out on the horizon. Next week, got one of the top games in the entire county, and it's in Division 4.
Yeah, they travel down to Montgomery. They haven't done that in since a couple years ago. A couple years ago when Montgomery was just kind of an program. Santana rolled over them down in Montgomery a couple years ago, but I don't foresee that occurring this year because Montgomery, they're coached by Freddie Dunkel, and if you're a San Diego sports fan, you recognize that name, Freddie Dunkel, the former SDSU Aztec standout. He's the head ball coach down there at Montgomery, and he's turned that program around. They're doing great things. Him and Coach TJ. I'm sorry, I don't the last name, but Coach TJ. I've seen him on. We've chatted on social media, and the rest of the Aztec staff. He. The big guy for Montgomery, the running back Jaheim Williams. He last week had 187 and 2 touchdowns in that big 38-24 victory over the Kearney Comets, which nobody saw happening. But you know what? It was Freaky Friday, Friday the 13th. All kinds of wacky madness happened on that night. For Montgomery, also Christian Venegas scored twice as he had 49 yards on the ground. So, also Montgomery is now the number 2 team in Division 4. So you got the battle of the top two teams in Division 4 happening on Friday night down in the South Bay. I think it's going to be a pretty good game. You know, Santana, obviously, their biggest game was against Sarah. They came out on top 31-14. And obviously, Montgomery's biggest game was this past Friday night with that big 38-24 win over the Kearney Comets. So it's just look at that, looking at those the two games. I think Santana is going to have some trouble stopping the run. Just to be honest with you, there, anytime that they've come up against, not this year per se, but in the past, when they've played a team that has had any kind of run game whatsoever, and especially big hogs up front. Okay, the big hot teams with the big hogs up front have given them trouble. And granted, you were there. Sweetwater, I heard, had big hogs up front. Gave Santana a little bit of trouble there for a little bit, but obviously, so
Luke Simonek, Gumby. I see you, Gumby. They were really doing a job. They were moving those guys all around, and also the defense. James Chaplin had an interception. Red Devils actually got a drive going together, and Chaplin kind of preserved the shutout, had an interception, and then Drew Temple came in and threw a touchdown pass in the second half. Note, in the first half, after the Sultans got stopped on their first drive, they scored pretty much with ease on their next 5 consecutive drives to lead 35-0 at halftime, Adam. So right now, I think the Sultans go down there and take care of business. I think it's going to be a good test, and I think the focus is there because the 4-0 sits right there beside Montgomery's name, and I think that's enough to get Santana's attention.
Oh, most definitely. Whoever wins this game is going to have the advantage for playoff seeding. Should the teams, stay on collision course, for the rest of the year. Right now, obviously, Santana's got the leg up because they beat Sarah and they're number 1 in Division 4. If Montgomery were to somehow pull off the big win, they'd be the new number 1 team in Division 4. That's just my opinion. I like you. I think Santana will go down there and take care of business. I think it'll be close for a little bit. Because you got to get used to playing down there again. Officiating is a little bit different than up here in the East County. And you got to take you're taking the bus ride down close to the border, on a Friday night. It's always a tough thing to do. Talking to Nathan Temple after that game a couple weeks ago, again, after Mar Vista, he wants to get those 40 touchdowns. As you've talked to him. So, like I said, I think it's going to be close for maybe the first quarter or so, maybe the first half. But I think Santana will come out on top. They'll figure it out. Temple, will put up the numbers.
Yeah, Temple has 14 touchdown passes this year through 4 games. Well, Adam, you went out to a game this past Friday night. What? Is the graphic wrong? 60-52. Adam, the score was like 50-40 at halftime. It wasn't that much, but it was almost that much. What was the score at halftime?
Yeah, it went to a football game and a basketball game broke out. As you can say, because when I posted that update, on the coaches group on Facebook. Everybody was like, "What? Really? 87 points combined at half?" I'm like, "Yep, that's not a misprint." It was get your popcorn, get the fireworks time out there. It was military appreciation night out at the ranch, out there in Lakeside. Um, it it was a back and forth affair. El Cap had a shot at the end. Unfortunately, a penalty cost them on a possession. They had the Patriots stopped on a 3rd and long, and unfortunately, a roughing the passer got called and gave the Patriots an automatic first down. They went to score. They went on to score, which was obviously the last touchdown for them. El Cap had a chance to come down the field and tie, but unfortunately couldn't get it done. Special teams also was an issue for El Cap. Missed extra points, a couple dropped passes. But I'll tell you what, I don't know what was said in that locker room. Second half was a totally different ball game for El Cap. They only allowed the 7 points, 6 or 7 points or whatever it was to the Patriots. They came out totally different team from the first half.
Yeah, and I didn't catch a lot of defensive statistics. Maybe there wasn't very many, but let's try to give El Cap's defense, other than from a team effort standpoint, in the second half, doing a great job really on, a team that everyone's talked about has, totally changed, and their offense is superb. They got the job done, and they were up, considerably there at the end, even though El Cap kind of fought back twice in the game. Maybe Henry was kind of in control after that early lead change in the first half. But Adam, maybe you can help me make heads or tails of a play. I saw a couple of different accounts, and I saw the highlight on TV. I'm trying to remember now. I wish I would have taken a note on this. The score was 32-20, Patrick Henry, I think somewhere in the second quarter. And there was a completion and a forced fumble. I think it was J.J. Girolamo that maybe intercepted the pass and then fumbled it, and Trenton March might have picked it up and ran it in for a touchdown. I don't even know if I have those guys right, but those guys are great defenders. And that was a neat touchdown that El Cap got, and that kept him right back in the game. That would be the first touchdown. They scored 5 touchdowns apparently in the last 5 minutes and change, 5.5 minutes of the second quarter. 5 touchdowns. Did you run out of ink in your pen?
I was literally too tired to run up and down the field. I just, myself and the two photographers that were the two photographers that were there were like, you know what, we're just gonna stay down here. It was bonkers, I'll tell you that. I mean, like I said, 87 points combined in that first half. I don't know if that's or possible record book type deal there. I don't know. But yeah, the quarterback for Henry, Matthew Castillo, he threw for 331 yards and 4 touchdowns on 22 of 43 passing. Elijah Lux ran for $138 on 17 carries and 2 touchdowns for the Patriots. 4 Patriot receivers scored touchdowns, so it wasn't like one person scored all the scores for Patrick Henry. They interestingly enough, and PJ Vanilla Gorilla, as he's known, photography, had told him, because he had seen them play the week prior against Monte Vista in that crazy 39-36 comeback win by Henry. I know.
75 points? Gee, that's
no, I know. But my point is that he said that they onside kicked every time, and I was like, what? And sure enough, every time they scored, they onside kicked. Well, that just gives an opportunity to put up points. Short field or you recover. One of those two things is going to happen, and sure enough, the either Henry recovered and took advantage, or El Cap got the ball and took advantage, because like I said, it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The first 4 or 5 possessions of the game was a score.
Well, I just can't get over the fact that Patrick Henry and Santana could meet somewhere down the line. But anyway, El Cap, I'll just hit on some of their highlights as well, because we want to talk about Wickhauser. He had 244 yards of total offense, but how about 108 yards on the ground? And he rushed for 3 touchdowns. Donnie Green, 224 yards and 2 touchdowns, and some other highlights for El Cap. Taylor Grasmick, he had a 14-yard touchdown run that the Vaqueros, that was a 3rd consecutive score. They pulled it within 54-52. So things still got exciting. And Savion Oakley had 4 catches for 53 yards. Kalen Lavallee, 5 catches, 71 yards. So exciting night. And El Cap, they're going to take the bye next week, and then the Tony Burner game against West Hills Wolfpack. So I guess we'll talk about that then. Let's keep going, huh? There's 2 East County teams, Adam, and we got egg on our face after this one, and my apologies. Looking back, I think I would say that Christian has played a tough schedule, and maybe they should have been. I should have given them more respect in the matchup with Monte Vista. They absolutely dominated. Nate Stein, 123 yards, 4 touchdowns. Gabe Krug, 156 yards passing, and 65-yard TD run as well. Christian just rolled Monte Vista.
Yeah, Christian, they put up 424 total yards. Another name that added some highlights for Christian was Todd Beezer, who caught 3 balls for 80 yards. I mean, like, you and I talked about in the during the week, this was such a hard game to predict, just because we weren't really sure. We thought Christian was going to continue, and we talked about this. We thought Christian was going to continue what they did from last year with the transfer of Gabe Krug from Saints to Christian, but early on, obviously, they hadn't played up to the potential, and then Monte Vista, losing the big running back Jamon McClendon. How do you replace that? That's just something you just can't say, oh, we're gonna, next man up type deal. That it just doesn't happen that way. Isaiah Garner, he's done a pretty good job so far. But obviously, as you know, he's no Jamon McClendon. But for Christian to come out and gut punch Monte Vista, whereas last year the game went into double overtime with Christian winning in that exciting game out in Spring Valley. I think that Christian came up and said, you know what? Hey, don't forget about us, basically.
Well, I think Christian, Christian Salacup had 2 touchdowns in that game for Christian, including a great diving catch in the end zone, and he finished with 90 yards of total offense, and just a great win for Christian. I think Monte Vista might have missed a golden opportunity, Adam. There was a gentleman on their sidelines. If they could have just put a uniform on him and sent him out there, I think they had a secret weapon. His name was Jamon McRendon, and on the sidelines, but they couldn't find a uniform for him, and I think they might have kept him in that game. Jamon was at the game, and too bad he saw the Monarchs get roughed up in that one. This week, Christian, Adam, they're going to play a good Central team. Watch out. So I don't want to sell Christian short again, but Central, they're rated higher in the computer rankings now. Christian will be at home, so I think that's going to even this matchup up. And since I was so wrong, I mean, I think Christian should try to, it would be an upset maybe if they win. I don't know. It's a weird rating because Central comes in with the better record, the higher ranking. Christian's looking good. Maybe they're underrated by the computers, by the math. And Central's coming in. It's going to be a close game, maybe a toss-up again.
Yeah, but I think the big advantage that Christian will have is the fact that this is at their home, and it's, as you know, it's always tough to get on the bus, go through those mountains in the valley or whatever route you take at whatever time of the day and or night. For that hour and a half or 120-mile round trip deal. I think Christian, they got a big confidence booster after getting manhandled the previous week against Soldotna from Alaska. I think, have they righted the ship? I think they've have righted the ship, and I think from hearing what Nate Stein had to say after the game, I think it was a big confidence booster for them to come out and just pummel the Monarchs. Like I said, for the previous last year, winning in double overtime. Central, I just don't, like you said, the computer rankings are a little weird. I don't think looking at the schedule myself, I don't really think those teams that they've played are as tough as the teams that Christian has played, especially considering that Soldotna was what did we say? They were the number one team or whatever in Alaska at that time during that week. I think Christian. I think they roll in this game. They get maybe a slow, just early on, just to get their feet tested. But I think they figure it out, and I think we possibly see another 35, 40 plus point game.
I hope so, but I mean, I'm just in a quandary here because I mean, Central's a team that does not lose football games. They're coming off a loss. They never lose. They haven't lost in 2 years. They were playing an out-of-town team. Yuma, Gila Ridge, I think, is that who they played? They lost 10-7. They didn't score until the final minutes of the game. So, a team that doesn't lose any games, and now you're going to say they're going to lose 2 in a row, and I think that's what makes this game so interesting. Central, I'm sorry. Central will be expected to win this game. But again, I guess it's just a toss-up. And you talk about the bus ride, Adam. Monte Vista is going to have to take their own bus ride, and they're going to take on Imperial. Imperial is going to be favored to win that game there, and Monte Vista, that's going to be a tough bus ride for them. So I think there's another thing to look at.
Yeah, like I said, that bus ride, it's a doozy. And to go down there to any of those schools down in the valley, it's going to be a packed house because they support their teams down there. They make it a carnival-like atmosphere at some of those games. And the officiating is definitely different down in the desert. Having experienced it myself, being a part of the Santana teams that every year would go down there to play any of those number of those schools down in the valley. Officiating is definitely different down there. I think Monte Vista, even if Imperial is not as good as they've been in the past, I think Monte Vista's got a game on their hands.
Adam, the West Hills Wolfpack were looking for an opponent that fit their needs on Friday night. I think they found one. The Chula Vista Spartans, they beat them 34-14, and the brothers Klingerman did it again. They combined for 3 touchdown receptions, two from uh, two from Brendan Oberg, I think, and one from Gerardo Hernandez. So good job by both quarterbacks. The West Coast quarterback playing 2 quarterbacks, but they're efficient. They don't make mistakes out there. They're not necessarily explosive, but they also combined for over 100 yards rushing. So great job. Brendan Green also had 57 yards. Steve Christini had an interception. The Wolfpack also had a sack in the win over Chula Vista. They got back to West Hills football.
Like you said, they played a team that they've, matched up well with. They got the 20-point victory at home in front of their fans. So that was a great thing. You said Brandon Oberg played well. Christini played well. Defensively, the entire defense of the Wolfpack played well, had a sack, and I think you said, offensively they did pretty decently. I guess you said they beat a team that they were evenly matched up with, but I figured that they would win against, just because, having looked at the schedule of the Spartans and of Chula Vista, I honestly thought West Hills, won the way that they should have.
Yeah, it looks like Chula Vista's way down, but give credit to the Wolfpack. Also, Jake Mayhew, 77 yards, including a touchdown. Nice job for the Wolfpack, and they will be up against El Capitan in 2 weeks. West Hills will take the bye next. How about one of the biggest games this week? It didn't work out our way, but Hilltop did a very nice job against Valhalla, 27-13. They kind of won, as the score really indicated. I thought Hilltop ended up doing a very nice job against Valhalla. Keegan Baker, 130 yards, very good game. He had a touchdown. He's got almost 600 yards now and 9 touchdowns this season, but maybe just not enough right now for Hilltop. I'd say one of the best stories in the county this season.
Yeah, Coach Wessling down there at Hilltop, they had the previous week had beaten El Cap in that doozy of a game. In the waning minutes of that game, to come back the next week and beat Valhalla the way that they did by 2 scores. The quarterback for Hilltop and the receiver, his last name is, I believe, is Aki, Mario Aki, I think his name is. They're going to be one of the teams, a tough team when it comes to playoff time in Division III. I think they'll be favored to win their league. Listening to Luke Ramirez, who covers the South Bay for the Union Tribune, he said, no offense to whoever it was, I think it was one of the other teams is also undefeated. He said Hilltop, they're the hot team, and sure enough, they did what they did against Valhalla. Talking to Don DeMars the other day about the game, he said, Hilltop, they had a game plan, and they played. Obviously Baker had his yardage, and Hilltop, the speed kills, and that's what Hilltop has.
Yeah, no problem for Valhalla. I think they can get back on track. They'll have a game this week. I'll just mention a couple more players. Raymond Sanchez, 7 carries for 42 yards. He caught a 39-yard pass as well from Luke Pillsbury, and Pillsbury also had a 9-yard rushing touchdown. So, pardon me, in just a moment we'll cover the good game this week. Really a toss-up, I think. We'll get your opinion on it in a moment when we talk about Mount Miguel, but Valhalla plays at Mount Miguel. So here's a real interesting game. It wasn't spectacular, but it was enthralling, I guess, or interesting because it was 0-0 after 3 quarters. It was a big game as El Cajon Valley had their 3-game winning streak snapped at them against a Claremont team that I think we kind of expected the Braves to win, but Claremont played well in their one victory on the field, and their other game was a forfeit, so it was a little bit tough to get a read on it. But obviously they played a little bit of defense and did the job, I think, most interesting here, even though the Braves. So Claremont scored a touchdown late in the game, right at the start of the 4th quarter, I believe. Then the Braves came back. Joe Malone had a rushing touchdown from 17 yards out. He did not see the majority of the snaps. It was Mario Jacobs, the senior, who competed with Joe Malone in the preseason at quarterback, and maybe they just felt the need to get something going or to get 2 guys in there, but it was Malone who scored the touchdown. The Braves just had 135 yards of total offense, 120 all-purpose yards for Demarius Hyde. He had 74 yards of total offense. Jacobs did the job also defensively, 5 solo tackles, 1 for loss. Derek Robinson had 5 tackles for the Braves, and the El Cajon secondary had defended passes by Tiger Kuhn and sophomore Daniel Jacobs. So a good job by the Braves. It didn't go their way. No problem, I think, losing this game to Claremont. Braves are going to have a huge, I want to say it 4 times. They're playing Vincent Memorial this week at home. What a spectacular game that might be. The Braves are going to be underdogs, but who knows?
Yeah, I've not seen Vincent Memorial. Speaking of Vincent Memorial, they'll be the opponent for Santana on their homecoming night. I was a little surprised about this score. I know you and I talked about this. It was a little surprising. But hats off to the Chieftains of Claremont. I don't think this loss derails what El Cajon Valley has set out to do. I just think that it will make them a better team. For if you can say a loss will, if you can say a loss does that. I think Coach Osborne will have his guys ready to go for that home game next week against Vincent Memorial. Demarius Hyde, I think, will have a big game against Vincent Memorial next week.
Well, Vincent Memorial, the top-ranked team right now in Division 5, so it's going to be a tough game for the Braves. But I think just like I mentioned about that other game with Santana and Montgomery, I think the thing that will catch the Braves' eye is that Vincent comes in not only as that top-ranked team in the division, but as an undefeated team. So, like I said, they could definitely upset them. We saw the Braves, pull off the big shocker before, so why not do it again? Okay, Adam. Well, we did have a team that finished on the wrong side of the ledger here this week, Mount Miguel. But I will tell you that Santa Fe Christian got out to a big 28-0 lead in this one. They had a player record 3 interceptions in the game, so you know that Mount Miguel was winging it. J.D. Laverty threw 40 passes in the game, 358 yards, and his top target, Jaheim Allen Pompey. They got hot late in the game and connected for 3 scores, but never kind of got close there at the end. Made it somewhat semi-interesting, but they would have needed some onside kicks and maybe some turnovers. They lost at Santa Fe Christian. They were underdogs, never really in it, but good performance still for JD and Jaheim. I will still continue to tout them. I'm not sure that any duo, maybe we can look on ECPreps, has racked up as many yards and completions together as those two. 10 times this past week for 235 yards.
Yeah, another note note to mention. JD Laverdier with his 358 yards and 3 touchdowns. He topped the 4,000 career passing yard marker in just his 13th game as a varsity quarterback. So that's pretty cool. Congratulations to JD Laverdier, 4,000 yard marker in a career for passing. That's pretty impressive. As you said, 10 balls caught by Pompey Allen, 235 yards and multiple scores, 3 touchdowns. We, like you and I talked about, figured Santa Fe Christian would win this game, just because they are pretty physical, usually a physical team. They beat Christian earlier in the year, I believe it was. Like you said, they got out to the 28-0 lead and 3 interceptions. I just thought, Santa Fe Christian outplayed the Matadors physically, physically, obviously, on defense.
Well, this week, Adam, Mount Miguel, they're going to play Valhalla, and I think that is maybe one of the most even matchups we'll see all season in the entire East County. I don't know, maybe those Hills League games, but even though this is a non-league game, the computers kind of have Valhalla slightly ranked ahead of Mount Miguel, but Mount Miguel is going to be at home. My feel is that maybe Valhalla, maybe it's supposed to win this game, but I think the home field advantage would say that Mount Miguel should win the game. So help me out here.
It's Mount Miguel, they're Division 3.
Yeah.
So
they're Division 3 or 4.
I can't remember, but yeah, it's definitely a tale of contrasting styles. With Mount Miguel and their speed. Division 4, okay. And their speed. With they like to sling the ball quite a bit, obviously, and Valhalla obviously giving the ball to the horse, Keegan Baker. Pillsbury can, I guess you can say, game manager. I know that can be seen as a bad term by a lot of people, but honestly, in my opinion, I don't think it is. I think that's what he does, and he does a pretty decent job at it. You said that I saw that the computers, when I was looking it up, have Valhalla slightly the slight favorite. I think it's going to be a really good game. I think it's whoever makes the least amount of mistakes is going to win this game. If Valhalla defensively can force Mount Miguel into a couple turnovers and they can take advantage of those, I think Valhalla comes out on top.
Okay, well, I'll maybe when I pick them, I might go with the Matadors since they're at home and they have the record they need a win. So just want to mention some more of those Matadors. This game kind of got buried. It was a 3:30 afternoon game up there at Santa Fe Christian. That also makes things kind of tough. I watched the game on the SFC webcast, and man, Alan Pompey was just incredible in the game and looked like one of those guys at the end of the game that was just sore from so much running and action and getting hit. By the time he was getting contacted in the fourth quarter, he needed a breather after every play, but he was just going all out. They were getting some easier touchdowns. Maybe SFC had let off the brakes a little bit, but those guys weren't stopping. They know the only way to to do it is to get back in the game with those passes. So Laverty, he really had a big game, and the only thing that kind of kept them out of maybe pulling off this upset was their drives just kind of kept getting terminated. There were the picks. Matthew Sanford of the Eagles had 3 interceptions in the game, so he was huge, and then some fourth down stops as well. But just throughout the day, some big plays by the Matador offense, mostly the passing game. Joseph Castillo, he had some big plays. Also, Julius Ford, a sack. Kojo Miller had a recovered fumble. He also had some long receptions. So good performance by the Matadors late. Quincy Snipes also had a sack for the Matadors, and we'll see in that game next week. Okay, just going to touch on one other game. I called it as a big game, and it was. Foothills Christian trailed 22-12 at the end of one quarter, but they came back to win. Don't know much about how the game went. It sounds like it could have been exciting because there was a touchdown for each team. Foothills outscored Avalon 20-8 in the second half. Tony Moroz had 146 yards passing, but Kevin Helfers, the other senior, had 84 yards passing and 142 yards on the ground. The junior, Jason Oliveira, had 118 yards receiving and a touchdown. Good game for Foothills Christian, and they'll play at Borrego Springs. They usually handle them. So good 8-man game out there. I think it was everything it was cracked up to be. Avalon came in as a pretty good team, and they threw for 300 yards in the contest and had 4 rushing touchdowns and rushed for 10 yards a carry. So good 8-man game. Adam, great job. Anything you want to talk about before we head out of here?
What's that?
Sorry, man. I knew we'd go over an hour. It's late. Kept you up.
All right. I think we got to obviously we have a short slate, small slate of games this week with quite a few of the teams having the bye. Hopefully, those teams will be able to, get the rest and come back, fully charged the following week. The one thing I have not seen, knock on wood, is the injury bug. Usually by now we've seen somebody, teams get beat up, early on and whatnot. And, with these buys the way that they are, which is kind of weird. It's really weird. We just haven't seen, you haven't seen the injuries like we have in the past. I mean, unless they're not being talked about. I mean, I don't know. At least in the games that I've been to, I have not seen the bad injuries. I've seen kids get the wind knocked out, get helped and whatnot, but I have not seen the bad injuries like we have in the past.
I was thinking about that actually while driving back from a game this week. I saw some other players get injured on some other teams, but I thought about that and I said, we've been fortunate. With all due respect, any of our kids that have been injured in the game this year, please get better. But none of our impact players, in our minds, maybe some linemen they're hard to keep track of, but
right.
Haven't really seen anything, or I haven't been at a game, for example, that's had a big delay or like a serious injury to any of our players. We root for all the players not to get hurt. So, okay, brother, great job, and we'll catch up with you next week. You can find Adam on Twitter at EC_preps. If I'm not mistaken, ECPreps SD.
Yeah,
right? I got that right. Thursday nights with Coach Quintera on their preview show, right?
Yeah.
And also on Friday nights with Christian Pedersen on their county wrap-up show as well. They have a nice podcast with several analysts coming on, including our buddy Raymond Brown. So I love that show as well. That's really good. That's hardcore. If you're into that, you got to make sure you listen to that one.
Yeah. And then obviously, our recap show here on Sunday nights, and of course, we will put it up. We put it up on the internet, or the interwebs, as some people call it. But no, we appreciate everybody tuning in, and check out Ramon Scott on Twitter. He puts out a lot of stuff, and then of course, you can check us out. Check me out at ECPreps. It's good. Do you know what game you're going to be at yet, Moni?
I do. Valhalla at Mount Miguel. Two teams.
All right.
favorite teams, so I'm excited about that one. I want to learn more about both those teams. They've been just a little bit under my radar, and
Yeah.
going to catch up with those teams for sure. Like I said, I don't know who's going to win that game. I want to give Miguel certainly a good chance being at home in that game, but I just think that Valhalla's start has been so impressive, and they're in the Hills League, so I think that maybe the stronger or the bigger team, the bigger grouped team, might be expected to win. So, like I said, they're going to be closely rated in the computers this week. That might suggest a home team victory. Not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, like you said, they're just so evenly close to each other. In the computer rankings. Like I said, I looked at Max Preps. I think based upon their little algorithm majigger thing, they had Valhalla winning by small spread, small margin. I think it was. I think I read. If Laverdier can come out and connect with Pompey, I think their speed is going to be a big factor in that game.
All right. Well, look forward to the results next week. We'll catch up on all these games and the following week. Adam Paul, ECPreps. Thank you, my man.
All right, Moni. Thanks a lot.
Good night.
Hey.